am a goofball. I'm weird. Class clown, a little silly. I mean, obviously, I kind of refer to myself lovingly as the Hollywood redneck. So, by definition, a paradox and a little silly. Or if you put it another way, a sensitive Pisces who played third base. Really the same thing. But let's keep in mind, folks, former stand-up comics, so let's not have a lot of high expectations about a lot of funny. The funny is going to be very limited. So, yes, I'm a bit silly. However, I take communication and intelligent communication very, very seriously. Over the years, Hollywood, 30-some years, people have always asked me, well, honestly, Kevin, how can 30 years in Hollywood teach you anything about omnipotent and intelligent communication? Well, the answer is actually a lot, because Hollywood's kind of a mess. I mean, we like to make fun of Hollywood, and I hear you. I make fun of Hollywood, and I live here, so I get it. But to that end, let's remember, I'm pretty sure we've been communicating as Homo sapiens long before Hollywood was invented. And yes, art imitates life. Writers write from the core of what they know, the core origin of their experience, what they've been through. That's where it comes from. 100%. So when I think about those actual things, and I spent time working on this, I have a huge, huge belief about the core origin of our communication. I personally believe, you may not agree, 99% of the discord that happens between people is because of a 1% communication failure. Now, I'm not talking about governments and wars and stuff like that. I'm talking about us. I'm talking about individuals, small groups, communication all the time. So I'm here today for one reason, and one reason only, and that is to begin a conversation within you with regards to an organic change of how you communicate and how you think about communication. That's why I'm here. Now, you may or may not have heard over the years the concept of, it's a statistic and it's pretty accurate, 99% of the laws were created for 1% of the people. It's actually a really fair statistic. And we think about 1% of a communication failure, it seems innocuous. It seems like, well, what's that going to do? But yet, it can be incredibly tragic, professionally, personally, sometimes even fatal. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that. I'm just saying, I'm not saying, I'm saying. 1% matters. And since I'm from Hollywood, and since I've spent time doing television in my life, we're going to have a couple of, let's say, movie references. I'm going to start one for you right now. There was a movie called Ocean's 11 that I'm going to guess some of the people in the room here have seen. Not everybody watching has. I'm sure there's a lot of men maybe who wish their wives or girlfriend hadn't seen it as much as maybe they have, because there's a couple of good-looking fellas in that movie. I am not one of them. Let's just be clear on that. But in this movie, I'm not going to bore you with the story, but overall it's this big bank robbery, and there's this moment right in the middle of the film. They've done all this elaborate planning, and they're going to make this big bank heist, and they have to blow the door open. And out of the whole movie, length of time and all the planning, they go to hit the remote, and the batteries are dead. Whole movie, a whole story, down to a AA battery. About 1% of the movie. Now, of course, it's a movie, so, they had a backup, and it worked out, and that's cool. But that's kind of my point with regards to what happens with our communication on a moment-to-moment, day-to-day basis. I mean, folks, stop and think about it. We communicate more today, moment-to-moment, globally, than any other time in history. Between all of the texts and the emails and the thing and the blah and the phone. Think about it. It's crazy town. George Bernard Shaw had a great quote. I absolutely love this quote. He said, "The problem with communication is the illusion that it's actually taken place." And what I love so much about that quote is the fact that he used the word illusion. Because again, I'm not talking about governments and politics and wars, and I'm certainly not talking about someone who is purposefully lying to you, not discussing. I'm talking about what we do every day, you guys, back and forth with one another, whether it's in person, whether it's on the phone. It doesn't make any difference. I mean, when we were younger, our form of multitasking while on the phone was how far you could go before the cord ran out. And then some years later, it was the mobile phone, and you're like on the phone like this, vacuuming. That was multitasking. But now, guys, we go way, way past that. We have conversations and start communicating in ways and places, quite frankly, we really shouldn't be. And we're not going to discuss those. But I mean, you're in the middle of calling, hey, Billy, listen, I got to call you back. Yeah, because I just jumped out of a plane. And in about 27 seconds, if I don't get off the phone, this is going to be the last time we talk. So that kind of stuff goes on. We're having conversations while we're doing all sorts of stuff, and it's horribly distracting. Lends itself to the 1% failure. And I have a second movie story for you, which is the opposite, because sometimes we learn things. I want this to sink in. We learn things by the opposite story. There's an old movie. Almost no one in this room or no one watching has ever seen, but I recommend you see it because it's really good. The movie called 3 Days of the Condor, a man named Robert Redford. You may have heard of it. A woman named Faye Dunaway. Doesn't matter what the story is, CIA, government, people killing people, stuff. At the very end, he's dealing with an assassin who 20 minutes before was supposed to kill him and now actually kills someone else because he was hired by someone else. And Robert Redford looks at this man, Max von Sydow, and says, I don't get it. Why? Max von Sydow was an assassin. His response is, I really don't think in terms of why. I certainly think about when, sometimes where, and always how much. That's great if you're an assassin, but we aren't. And I only care about the why of how we go about communicating, the origin, the core answer of where it comes from. That's all that matters to me. Because, yes, knowledge is power. We all agree with that, for sure. But take this one with you if you don't know it. Victory loves preparation. Now, when you start talking about preparation, I don't mean preparation H. I'm not saying, I'm just saying. That's not what I mean. When you think about preparation and we think about communication, you may be sitting there thinking, come on, Kev, dude, we're dealing with communications in milliseconds all the time, every day. Yeah, it's actually why it gets worse. I'm not necessarily talking about hours of planning. I'm talking about 10 seconds sometimes, 15 seconds sometimes before you pop off with that next thing. There's a reason why, you guys, because efficient communication, I don't care if it's 2 seconds long, doesn't matter to me if it's 10 minutes long, if it's an email thread that's been going on for 30 days, or a text that has 4 exchanges. It doesn't matter. It's all the same. And I'm not going to break into an 80s rock song, because that would be tragic. It's all the same. What I'm talking about is that efficiency of how you get it done, the why of what you're doing. Efficient communication leaves no doubt. That's what happens to it. And it's awesome because you can't know what your origin is unless you're paying attention to it. So I'm not talking about long efforts on the why, and it leaves no doubt. I'm just talking about the fact that we have to do this moment to moment all the time. So the planning part of this, the efficiency part of this, you may have heard, some lawyers are actually trained to never ask a question in court you don't already know the answer to. Now, I'm sure there are people who pay attention to that. I'm sure there aren't. But the people who do it for a reason, because they prepared to already know the answer. And what comes out of us in communication, horribly important. And it brings me to how all of this began to come to me over the course of years. And of course, it came through being an actor and being trained to be an actor. I mean, you guys have to remember, I am from Butt Snot Nowhere, Tennessee. And I'm serious, when you look it up, you can actually find it on the map. It actually says that, Butt Snot. Look it up. It's on GPS. You got to bear that in mind. So I'm asking everybody from this point forward, for the next half hour, do me a favor. Try to put down your cultural and political ideologies, because this conversation isn't about that stuff. This conversation is about you. When I started studying for being an actor, which is ironically communication that we're imparting from the origin of us that somebody else wrote. We didn't write it, but we have to assimilate it, assess it, and process it so that you, the audience, actually believes we believe it. And funny enough, in my acting class, rest his soul, David LeGrant, he would put two people up on a stage because that's what you do in acting class. Great old guy from New York. And when they finished, they would always talk about what you worked on. What were you working on? And he would drill down further and further on specificity. And at some point, these two people sitting here, whoever they were talking to, would say back to him, they would suddenly change the pronoun from I, and they would all of a sudden start talking about it. Because they knew they had not done what he was asking them. They knew in the core inside of themselves. They knew. They start to say, well, it was going well, and then and David would just stop them and go, I'm sorry. Who's the it? Did it just drive to Modesto? Everybody, you are the it. We are the it. This is about you. It doesn't matter in your communication whether you originate it, reply to it, direct it to somebody else, or it's passing through you and passing it on. You're always the it. Hugely important. I studied with another guy, famous television director. He's passed on as well, Corey Allen, terrific cat. He had an exercise. He made us sit down, grab a couple of pieces of material. They didn't match up. It didn't matter. It wasn't the point. And he said, you are talking to someone about the fact that you're terminally ill. These are games that we play as actors, but they're all about communication. You have to pick somebody that you're talking to. And you have to talk to them about whether or not you've lived a good life. This was the core emotion part of this. Now, I don't know why I did it. This is 25 some years ago. But I naturally that day chose to talk to myself. That's what I chose in this acting lesson. I almost get choked up talking about it today, and it was 25 years ago. Because the point is, it's yourself. Everything that comes out of us, whether it's out of your mouth or whether it's this, it originates in you. Now, I grew up in the rural South. I've lived in Hollywood for a long time. 3+ decades in television, 50-some television shows, 3 long-term relationships, 21 countries, and founded and ran a company for 23 years. And in all of that mess, you guys, I have learned 3 incontrovertible truths about communication. I recommend if you have a pen, jot them down if you don't already know this. Number 1, human error is inevitable, but mostly preventable. Mostly. Number 2, intelligent communication protocol is universal. I mean, come on. It doesn't matter what your religion is or where you're from or what color you are, what your ethnicity is. All over the world, man, we're just trying to get through the day, trying to get through your job, trying to impress somebody. Has nothing to do with what language you speak. Most of the time, I just figure the difference is in all of us is the food. That's about it. Because as John Denver said, for as different as we are, we're all the same. This is us. It comes out of us. And number 3, communication that causes confusion and chaos is extraordinarily expensive. Now, you can judge what you define as expensive. Maybe it costs you an account, has a lot of money. Maybe it costs you your job. Maybe it costs you your life. And it's 1%. And those things are unequivocally true, but we're not going to go again all the way to fatality all the time. We're just talking about maybe you just mess up a conversation and it screws up your relationship. But it's because of where communication comes from, as it is for an actor. In here, together, right out of a blender. And it's not a kale shake. So I spent a lot of time examining that as it came out of being an actor, because I ran this company and I had to deal with folks all the time. And I really realized how much I didn't communicate as well as I thought I did. It's a tiny but massive change. Yes, like I say, I talk a lot in Walking Contradictions and Paradoxes, okay? Hollywood redneck, sensitive Pisces, third baseman. It'll come to you. And about 10 years ago, we had a huge cultural change in the world, not just America, in the world, where all of a sudden, we used to just take our phones and take pictures of the bran muffin and post it on Facebook and go, look what I'm eating today. And then about 10 years ago, we thought, no, wait, this would be way better if I actually take a picture of me with the bran muffin. Now it's way better. Called the selfie. And by the way, we have, hardware now for this is not going away. Selfies are not going away anytime soon. So let's get used to it. Once again, they make a lot of fun about Hollywood about being narcissists, but come on. Those folks who take a lot of selfies, let's be serious. Come on, Hollywood bleeds out into everyone. We're people. But then the more I started thinking about it, the more I spent time on the communication aspect of what I was working on, I realized there was an issue with the selfie. It was spelled wrong. Mine is the selfie. Because that 1% of communication that fails is because most of us function and origin of our communication comes spoken out of fear, ego, or envy. It's not our fault. We're human. But that is what colors a great deal of our communication. Come on, communication, our psychology, our childhood wiring, your experiences, your baggage, your stuff. This all drives our communication. And when you communicate from, cognitive of it or not, from fear, ego, or envy, much like your life, your communication is going to be colored potentially wrong. That's why when I look at Mr. Shaw's quote about the illusion that it's taken place, people say, well, does that mean you're lying? It's like, no, I actually believe most people mean what they say. They just don't say what they mean. I mean, come on, haven't you ever had that conversation with someone? You're going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, text, whatever it may be, and you're like, what's going on? And then they finally say something, and you go, oh, now I know what you're talking about. How come you just didn't say that? And the other person goes, I did. And you're like, yeah, but I didn't understand it. That's the failure in communication. Extrapolate that out exponentially over all of your jobs in your life and every day. Do you really want to go home with that text thread in your head from work over the weekend or the email thread from last week? No. Efficient communication leaves no doubt. And it's the inception point of it. That is where it starts. That's simply how it works. And I'm a big advocate of having a program and a system that helps solve that. Here's another movie reference for you. Way back, it's probably 20 years ago, it was a movie called Crimson Tide. Gene Hackman, Denzel Washington, actually based on a true story that people, if they're old enough, know from way back. 1940s, nuclear sub almost created a nuclear war in this world over one communication transmission. Gene Hackman was number one in command, Denzel was second in command, mutiny, all this on a nuclear sub. There's a shot in the movie, Denzel Washington holding the electronic submission at that time and said, we don't know what this means because the transmission was incomplete. And that's a lot of where I'm coming from, you guys. Our communications are commonly incomplete. We don't speak in enough natural disclaimers and qualifiers to make sure that somebody actually knows what we're talking about. It's not uncommon at all. It's extraordinarily common, and it's not your fault. It's nobody's fault. I'm just trying to help solve it because I wanted to solve it for myself. There are a lot of really good things that come out of great, efficient communication. One of our problems with communication is, who taught us? How did we learn? We learned how to speak. We learned our language, whatever it may be. But I'm talking about communication. I'm just talking about running your mouth like I'm doing right now. I'm talking about engagement. We grow up learning communication as a destination. Hey, I'll see you in 5 minutes. Hey, could you mow the lawn, Evan? Hey, but that's how we talk. Clean up your room. Do this, do that. I'll be there. Then it's always destination. Yet when we're at parties and we're having a glass of wine, we're all very existential about, dude, it's just the journey. Yeah, we talk about the journey, except that's not how we communicate. We don't communicate with enough in the journey to make sure someone understands exactly what you mean. And that's what Shaw meant by the illusion of it. The illusion that it's taken place. That's what we skip. There are 5 things that poor communication causes us to do. And their consequences, and they're unfortunate. And a lot of times they seem innocuous, but they aren't. Once again, if you have something to write these down with, please do. When you don't communicate and don't understand the inception, orientation of where your stuff comes from, this is what happens commonly when you speak with the self-fee that you have to pay out of fear, ego, and envy. Number 1, we omit things from our communication. Number 2, we're silent. Be clear, I get omit and silence could be looked at as the same. They're not. I say omit because commonly omissions happen more when you type or write something. Silence happens more when you're talking to someone or a group or a conference room or anything that I just leave out today. Omit and silence. 2 things that happen when we speak from fear of my boss or ego of having too much bravado or the envy of the person I'm having to sit in the conference room with who just got that raise in the thing and I'm really pissed off. Then the 2 other things that happen, 3 and 4, are familiarity, which breeds far more than contempt. Because familiarity with people make us skip things oh, you'll know what I'm talking about. I mean, come on, Connie, you know what I'm talking about. We've known each other. Like, no, people still don't. 3 and 4, familiarity and assumptions. And as my intro said, I live my life by the 4 agreements, and one of which is don't assume. I ask people questions all the time. I drive them crazy if I don't know what they're talking about. That's what I do. I just keep asking until I have a clue to what you really mean, because I know you said what you meant, but I don't think you meant what you said. So I do that. And number 5 is one you're not expecting, but it's really important, especially in business and sometimes personally. And it's this. It's how we choose to communicate that gets way thrown off by fear, ego, and envy. Really costly on the selfie, because this is about yourself. And number 5 is whether or not it was he said, she said. And this is what I mean. You guys may have heard this. You may have watched a TV show. You know, I'm not a lawyer, but I have played one on television. And one of the things that occurs in that is whether or not you have evidence. You'll see a lawyer in a court, in a show or whatever, and someone will testify, and the lawyer will stand up and say, objection, hearsay, because they don't have any evidence. The 5th mistake that the selfie causes in communication are things that should be said to an individual that is not recorded or documented versus the things that should be typed in writing or sent as an email. And commonly, because of fear, ego, and envy, we get these things backwards. And it's not good. Imagine when you're supposed to have just said something to someone that's filled with emotion. You know the old story, write a letter but don't send it. So many people spend time typing and writing things they really should just be discussing, so there's no record of it. And then there's really important things in jobs and professions. Hey, Billy, yeah, do the thing with the blah and the whoop-de-doo and get the guy with the balloon and the goat and the thing, and I'll see you on Friday. And 2 days later, he's like, hey, Billy, what happened to the goat and the balloon? No, dude, you didn't say the goat and the balloon. That should be in writing because you need it as a reference. These are the things that happen going too fast with knee-jerk reactions throughout our day and not paying attention to our communication. That's what goes on. It gets skipped. It gets omitted. And it's really bad for us. Those are the 5. Now, once again, in my introduction, one of the things I love the most about Eleanor's quote is learn from the mistakes of others. You don't have time to make them all yourself. And we think in communication because we've gotten to the age that we've gotten to. It's like, man, I get it. I understand. I know communication. And we think it's not a big deal. But the actual thing that drives all of this is personality and character. Now, I know you've heard this before. You've seen seminars, read books. Personality is the thin veneer. It's the image. It's the public relations. It's how we occur to people. Oddly, I occur to people very differently than what I am. That's why I'm the Hollywood redneck. That's why I'm a sensitive Pisces who played third base. But personality also reacts. And most of our communication in life, tragically, comes from a reaction, even when we're originating something. Character, integrity, responsibility. Character is who you are. Character prepares. Personality reacts. Character prepares. Remember what I said earlier? Knowledge is power. Victory loves preparation. And I'm not talking about a lot. Sometimes I'm just talking about 15 seconds, 20 seconds. Anything that will save you in the system that I'm about to hand you in 2 seconds. And it comes from this. It comes from acting. I spent a lot of years doing this, and I suddenly learned, oh my goodness, this goes hand in hand with being a better communicator. In the audition world, we think of stage and we think of class, but those environments are really different. When you go to walk into a film and television audition, it's kind of like what's sitting in front of me now. It's a couple of people and a camera. Back in the day, there was no cameras, like 3 or 4 people. And it felt like walking into a morgue. It wasn't that anybody was trying to be mean or rude. It's just they're all there frozen. One person's going to read with you and they hope you're good. But you're not getting back from them anything like we do in a communication. As I began to do this a lot and do my work as an actor in the origin of my communication, I suddenly realized, oh my goodness, I have to be way up here, but I'm walking into a room that's given me, because the casting director is just kind of, dude, they're not bad. They're not trying to be bad. They're just not a performer who's trying to give you a performance to work with. And I call it asexual reproduction. I've been saying it for years about auditions for film and television. That's what it's like. You just got to create all on your own. And over the course of time, you guys, this is the program that I realized this was. Because the core of acting comes down to these 3 things. We just use different language for it. So when you want to alter your communications in perpetuity of your life, here you go. If you haven't picked your pen up yet, you might want to do it now. There was a game way back in the day called Clue. I wonder who's watching who even remembers this board game. But it was one of those mystery whodunit board games. And they had a little joke about the game because all the little pieces were a person or a gal's name, but it was a color. Mr. Green, Miss Purple, and it was laid out in a house with all the rooms designated, dining room, kitchen, bedroom, and then there was a weapon, knife, candlestick, and the whole point of the game was to figure out in the end if it was Mr. Green in the dining room with a candlestick. That was the point. And what's ironic about that in the communication that I'm talking to you about is it involves 3 things: audience, environment, and intent. And those 3 words will change your life. 15 seconds. Give me 10 seconds. Realize as an actor, when we study and we learn to core origin communication someone else wrote to have you believe, audience, who am I talking to? What's my relationship with them? These are the things we discuss in acting class. Environment, what I just said. Dining room, even in your own house, a conversation with your wife or your husband at 3 o'clock in the morning in the bedroom is not the same as a conversation at 2 o'clock in the afternoon with kids running around in the kitchen. And intent. Environment is, where are you? Place, time, location. Are you in public? Are you in private? Are you in a conference room? Is it just you and me? These things matter. They affect our communication. They affect your self-fee that you're going to pay because they affect your fear, ego, and your envy. And your communication comes out of a lot of where you are. And of course, intent. That's the big thing you hear from actors. If you have friends that are actors, they're like, what's my motivation? What's my objective? What do I want? What do I need? Well, come on, guys. In all of our communication, business, etc., we want or need something. 100%. We need something. We got to get something out of this. You want efficient communication if you just stop for a millisecond and think about, who am I talking to? Where am I? What am I trying to accomplish? You will have less important omissions. You will say the proper thing when you're not being silent. You won't assume that just because this person has a wonderful degree or holds a high position, which is one of the worst assumptions on the planet. I know a lot of doctors and lawyers outside of their profession, they can't communicate for the wind. I've worked with directors who can't communicate. Okay, just let that sink in for a second. Imagine a director who can't communicate. That's pretty good. That's like a pope who doesn't understand Catholicism. Seriously. Director says to you, this is my point. Audience, environment, intent happens every day, all day long. Okay, so Kev, that was great. We need you to do that faster. Faster. You mean like I'm being chased by a bear faster? I have to go to the bathroom faster, or my wife's water just broke and we got to get to the hospital faster? Like, I don't know what fast. That's my point. There's a lot of minutia in communication. So just learn audience, environment, and intent. Take a moment. If you spend more time with this, you on your own will become a much better communicator, and it will lessen how much you actually speak from fear, ego, or envy. I mean, come on, guys, our days are nuts. Like I said, we're doing things on the phone we shouldn't be doing. We're in the middle of a 6-person text like this, and you got things going on, and you're texting that person and texting them, and you write, and then some guy's making you mad, and you start writing the whole thing, and it's really vitriolic, and you hit send. And it went to your mom. Now, I don't know what that text was, but I'm going to bet you for a lot of us, if you accidentally send one of those texts one day to your mom, this one may take a while to explain. I'm not saying, I'm just saying. We don't want to have that one too much. But that's what happens to us the course of our day. Just, who's your audience? Where are you? What are you trying to accomplish? Really hone down on that, because Hollywood is a mess, you guys. It's 100%. You have to think about what Hollywood is in a workplace. You're talking about people from all over the world sometimes who speak different languages coming together with all kinds of different job descriptions and skill sets to do stuff thrown into a pile that involves a lot of emotion and deadlines that change about, every 15 minutes. This is a bit of a train wreck on given days. And here's the other wrinkle that will always come into your life, because you're not always talking to your best friend or your colleague that you like at work. Sometimes you have to do business with someone you don't get along with. My acting coach, going back to David LeGrand, had a big philosophy. It was very common in Hollywood to have a beginner's class, an intermediate class, and an advanced class. He refused to do it. And when asked about it, he said, there's a reason for that. He said, because you work long enough in this business, you will wind up working with someone that has no idea what they're doing. And at some point, maybe you have no idea, and they're the veteran. And both of those happened to me. Both of them did. My first episodic television show for prime time was Matlock with Andy Griffith. Last day of shooting, last shot of the day on location. I screw this up, I just cost the production who knows what. It's a little intimidating. Same thing happened 15 years later. Shooting a show with Dick Van Dyke, ironically, and now I'm about to walk in. They're about action, sound speed, rolling, boom, and my wife is holding my hand for the scene, shaking like a leaf. And I looked at her, I go, are you okay? She said, yeah, it's my first time. I was like, there it is. You have that paradox in Hollywood all the time. It's a mess. Absolute mess. And sometimes it gets very, very costly. Now, I'm not going to be ending with this, but this is important, because how you view something that feels fatal in your life, and we have lots of things that aren't fatal that feel fatal. Conversations go bad, an email goes bad, something happens with an important relationship, an important client. That happens a lot. Going about 40 years ago-ish, there's a director named John Landis doing a film called The Twilight Zone. Many people know this story. Studio film, millions of dollars, everybody a professional, all sorts of walkie-talkies, everybody can communicate. And yet somehow, the helicopter in the scene managed to decapitate 3 people, 2 of whom were children. That's a bad day. Okay, we'll bring it forward, not 40 years, and we'll bring it to about 5 or 6 years ago. Film in Georgia. Production. Again, now it's modern era. Ooh, modern era. It's technology. Everybody got a phone. Communication. The young lady named Sarah Jones in production. Hit by a train. Yuck. Not a good day. This is my 1%. No, I'm not going to finish with that. But this is my point about the juxtaposition of what happens with all of our craziness with communication. Sometimes bad stuff occurs. Bad stuff, it's avoidable. Audience, environment, intent. Human error is inevitable, but mostly preventable. So instead of that story, I'm going to finish with this story. Hopefully you like this one better. But we have a thing in Hollywood called your demo reel. It's just like your business card. It just happens to be a visual business card. That's what it's for. And going all the way back to when I first started, of course, it involved a lot of trucks and things to make a videotape that you had to spend $700 to send through the mail because it was this big. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether the demo reel is a 8-track tape, VHS, or whether it was a DVD, or now it's just a click on the link and you watch it. This is your professional stuff. And so I used to have a thing in the company that I ran. There was an education organization for actors, and we would have a class on demo reels. And I would ask people, hey, proud of your demo reel? And somebody would always go, yes, I am. Great, give it to me. And the second I went to put the demo reel in the machine, back when we did that 14 years ago, in the machine, all of a sudden, the voice would come from the back, like, hey, now listen, because there are people in the room, right? Watch. Hey, listen, just so blah thing and a whoop-de-doo, blah. And they started giving disclaimers to all the stuff we had to know about why maybe it might not be as good as I kind of said it was. And this was an interesting thing for me to witness. How we want to be excused for stuff all the time. And guys, a lot of times our communication, when it fails, we don't get excused for. Your demo reel isn't just something that your family is going to watch at the holiday and applaud for you. So I used to give them a scenario. And this is a scenario I present to you in wrapping this up, because so much of our communication that's professional is with somebody we don't know. And it's also, a lot of times, unexpected. How are you going to respond? I said, okay, so you mailed in your DVD to some studio here in Hollywood, to a casting person. And the janitor came along that night and it was sitting on the edge of the desk, and it accidentally got knocked off and it landed on a towel. And this is like a movie scene. And he drags it around for a couple of hallways and then realizes, picks it up, doesn't know where it goes, and just sets it on someone's desk. Turns out in the morning, the desk that he set it on was one of the top executives. And of course, curiosity killed the cat. And naturally, this executive who you'd want to watch your demo or who you'd want to communicate with sticks it in and watches it. And I said to that person, I said, that is the core truth of how good your demo reel is when you can do something that leaves no doubt with a complete stranger who matters. And that's a lot of what we do in communication. A lot of times we think stuff doesn't matter. Maybe it's because some of us are getting older, self-included. I don't like wasted time. I don't like unnecessary confusion, chaos. Yes, I'm a goofball. 100%. I'm a smart aleck all the time. I make jokes in the middle of being serious. It's what I do. But I am deathly serious about being efficient, that when I spend time selling something to someone, that they understand exactly what I mean. Say what I mean and mean what I say. And when I don't, I ask people questions until I wear them out to make sure that I'm proceeding with whatever this was about in proper fashion. If we don't do that, guys, your life will become continually harder and harder. You'll spend a lot of your time, especially with all the communication we do now, constantly in communication triage. I mean, seriously? I'm tired just talking about it. We don't want to do that. And communication triage in business cost you your job, cost you a position, cost you a raise, cost you a client. We want to get better at this. So please, audience, environment, intent. Pay attention. Full stop. Listen, think, receive, ask questions. A, E, I. Assess and execute. Do that as much as you can, and it will become second nature. The Hollywood Redneck, Kevin E. West.